Oh, definitely. Yeah, I set up some, I called them critter cams that were actually trail cameras, and I put them in some places, you know, so we could see if there were any trespassers coming in. But then also, I put them along a lot of the reservoirs so I could get a better sense of what birds were there, because I'm not a birder by nature. So this is it was a learning curve for me.
Yeah.
Right.
But
so
now
it's
you can
better
look at the
still.
yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I got some amazing photos of birds. It was, and also a lot of deer too. They're definitely, all the animals know that the camera's there, and that's pretty,
Really,
makes
that's
for
so
some pretty interesting photos. Yeah.
So they get aware of the camera. That's something that I wouldn't have thought you would discover, but that's a fun discovery.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of inquisitive coyotes, some mule deer that stare at it, and then there's, I call it the bobcat selfie. It was looking at the camera at night, so it was in black and white, but you just see this big white face and some whiskers popping out on either side. It was definitely sniffing the camera.
Neat, because they're usually pretty evasive creatures, right? Like bobcats aren't ones to really come out and say hello or something. So
no, not at all.
to have a little wave. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it looks like we have a few folks who've joined in. I'd like to hear a lot more about everything you have to say about the ranch. The first animal I think I spotted out there was a coyote, and I can still remember the image in my head from the memory of watching it run across in the distance and thinking like that's the shape of the tail and everything. So it's really fun to hear about what else is out there, especially since initially I had just known this area for a big, flat, wide open space where there's, you know, not a lot of plant life or anything really. So it's fun to explore it from this perspective. Okay, so for those who've joined us, let's go ahead and talk about introductions. This is the virtual Black Rock Rendezvous, and tonight we're going to be going on a virtual fly ranch nature walk with Dr. Lisa Beers, who's here with us as a Burning Man Project Land Fellow, and also with Erika Wesnousky, who is a lead docent, one of the guides who volunteers to take people on the nature walks at Fly Ranch. It's part of how Fly Ranch remains accessible to the public, although it is private property. And I'll just mention that right now it is presently closed to the public, pending a future opening time. So tonight we're going to press play on a video that will take us walking along some of the nature walk as you would see it around Fly Ranch. And we're going to start at the beginning where we have a trailer. So who's going to lead us off? Would you like to lead us, Lisa, or how about Erika?
How about you, Erika?
Okay, I'll start us off. Okay. I would say, before we actually nature walk, we prepare people with radical self-reliance. One of those things would be to take care of their needs. And so it's appropriate for us to be starting with the composting toilets, the dry toilets. And especially in this day and age where toilets are a threat to many people. We never would have anticipated the preparations that we've put in place. So this trailer was built by Burners Without Borders. And they have made a few of this design. It's actually a dry toilet, so there's a bin with wood shavings, and we consider each use a contribution to our Humanure project. We appreciate your deposits.
Awesome, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so now that we've talked about where the only place is for using the restroom at the site, we can begin the walk. And we start the walk by going around this area. So Erika, maybe you could describe to us, what is it that we are walking on as the walk begins?
When we leave the parking area where there are the toilets and the guardian pad, we head towards the east, towards Wallapai Flat, and then beyond that Black Rock Desert. So we're walking along the lower dam, the dam, the berm put in place to hold the reservoir for water that washes down in the artesian system and then up from the geothermal system.
Okay. Lisa, is there anything you want to add to this particular area, like a description of this area?
Sure. So as you can tell, you can see some playa off to the right-hand side, and so all of the springs that are always flowing there would just flow naturally to the southwest excuse me, to the southeast where the Hualapai Playa is, and be a main source of water to that playa. But a lot of that water has now been cut off because of this dam. But it's also, this dam is helping to hold a lot of the water that, or most of the water that gets used for the Burning Man event for dust abatement in all the city streets. So it's a pretty important local source of water that is being held by this dam.
So that water,
Great, thank you.
the water that
Go
is
ahead.
being spread on the streets at Black Rock City, it does not come from Frog Pond. It comes from our lithium-rich pools at Fly Ranch.
Yeah, good to know. And then it goes right back down, which is all the more reason that we have to make sure we're protecting what's on the ground when we're out there, because what gets washed in, we want to make sure that it's mostly just the water going back down there.
Well, can you wait right here?
Yeah.
We're looking now towards the Calico Hills. And then beyond that, in the distance, you can see King Lear Peak, which is actually in, Calico Hills is one of the wilderness study areas, and Jackson, South Jackson and North Jackson Mountains are also wilderness study areas. So the peak that you can see farthest away, you're just coming up on it, is King Lear Peak, and that's about 8,900 feet, just because that's a really nice view of it. So in Nevada,
highlight.
yeah, when we hike in Nevada, when we drive, we're really lucky. We sometimes have 5 mountain range days. So we're in part of the Basin and Range. There are 314 north-south trending mountain ranges across the Basin and Range, across Nevada, and 5 of those are within the Black Rock Desert High Rock Canyon Conservation Area.
Wow.
So yeah, we're lucky to have that. The Granite Range is right behind us. We'll be seeing that as we continue walking.
All right, everyone. So look out to the distance. You can see King Lear right about where the mouse is, right in that area. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, let's go a little further. And then I see some questions popping up. So we're just about to transition to, we found the Nevada state insect here. So this is a vivid dancer damselfly, and let's talk about this. And we also have a picture of a dragonfly, so we can contrast the difference between this damselfly and a dragonfly that you might find both on Fly Ranch.
Lisa, Scripus?
Oh, sure. So the damselfly is a much more like a smaller insect. It's got smaller wings and a smaller a body, where the dragonflies are much more robust. They're much more, I would say, aggressive hunters. And there are many, many species out there. I wish that I was more of an entomologist to know more than just that being a dragonfly, but I've definitely seen at least 8 species of dragonflies and a couple different species of damselflies.
So this, the vivid dancer is our Nevada state insect. It turns out that each state has its own insect. You might want to research what is yours. So the differences, and they're obvious. This is something that I ask kids when we're walking, if they can tell the difference between the damselflies and the dragonflies. And you can see here the damselfly sits with its wings folded vertically over its back. But when we see the dragonfly photo, you see that they hold their wings out to the side when they're still. I looked this up. I think this is a brown hawker dragonfly, but I'm not sure. And I think it's a female because we don't see the blue spots on its second and third segments.
Okay, cool. So now, you guys, we have a couple of questions coming up about this. So can we pause for a minute and answer a few Q&As?
Sure.
Great. So one is going back a minute, and it asks, why are the pools lithium rich at Fly Ranch?
Scripus.
It's just the source of the water that's coming up from the earth has lithium, and there's a lot of lithium within this region of the United States, and so that's just being absorbed into the water. So I forget quite what the levels are. There's also silver that's in the water, and the silver helps with some of the purification, so the water doesn't have to get tested on a regular basis to make sure that people are okay for soaking in it. And the lithium just boosts it's a natural lifter of spirits. So it always feels nice to take a soak.
Nice. All right, thank you for answering that. It's interesting. I knew a little bit of that, but you learn a little more every time. Let's see, the next question we have is, do dragonflies and damselflies both have compound eyes? So I don't know, Lisa, do you want to jump on that one, or Erika, which one do you feel?
I haven't looked it up, but I would say by looking at them, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so we'll take a second here and say, I actually also don't know off the top of my head, but let's take a look at the picture and go back between the two for just a second to, whoops, went too far. So that one has kind of bulbous eyes on top, and that one does too. Yeah, okay. Guess we'll have to look that up. And okay, the other one says, is fly ranch in the surrounding area becoming more and more dry? They're wondering about desertification and a decline in plant or animal life in the past several years.
Scurpus.
Sure. So the year that I was out at Fly in 2017 into 2018, so 2017 was a particularly wet year. That's probably when you might have seen photos up from Lake Tahoe where it's like a 30-foot snowpack that somebody's standing next to. So I got to see a lot of plants, and as a result, a lot of insects that you probably wouldn't see on a drier year. So I would say I was on the outlier edge of things when I was studying the property. So I got to see a lot and document a lot. But then as a comparison in the past couple of years, it hasn't been quite as rich with some of the annual plants that pop up every once in a while. I tend to look more at plants just because of my my profession, but I do see that it is getting drier. And I'm not sure if it's just because of just the different changes across years, like interannual changes, or if it's a trend towards things going drier.
How long do you think you would want to measure something like that? Like, do you think a decade is enough time, or would we need several decades to really understand if this is like this flooding or dry spell is part of a natural broad picture or something really exceptional?
I would say at least a decade. I mean, in a lot of places we're lucky even if we just get 2 or 3 years of data. So having something, especially when you're looking at changes in climate or rainfall patterns, you'd like to have at least 10 years and ideally longer. But this is a good starting point.
Great, awesome. And we're in the first decade of Burning Man project, having fly ranch projects. So we're kind of still, you were very much in those first couple of years of understanding from this perspective of the new time.
Right. And one thing we'll chat about is that, so this is the first year in 20 some odd years that water has not been extracted from Fly Ranch for the Burning Man event. So I'm curious what the water levels look like just in general. You know, and in August is the peak heat and there's not rain occurring. So I'm just curious to see that difference, if things really do draw down.
Yes, interesting in that sense.
We're talking about millions of gallons being drawn too, so we should see quite an impact. That's going to be fascinating this year on a smaller scale to see the human impacts and the lack of those impacts, because first of all, we can't do the walks. We're not going to be impacted by Black Rock City being developed in the area, unfortunately.
Yeah,
it's true, but it is a year to see like how does that affect the water levels, or is it measurable in a year, or yeah. So it's really great that you're out there and doing that kind of work to give consideration to these questions, because you know it's one thing to have the question, it's another thing to have someone there to work on the answers. So thank you for being there for that. Are you guys ready to go check out the pier?
Sure, but I'm going to talk while you're rolling along. I have to say,
that's good.
I'm a surrogate here. I'm a stand-in for all the docents who are missing being on the land. You know, there are many volunteers who would love to have taken the walk even this past Saturday when we recorded this, who would love to be welcoming the strangers, whether they're little white birds with yellow legs or whatever. We're missing everyone terribly, and we're missing the time that we get to spend at the ranch. So we've just walked the pier. The pier is one of the art projects from Burning Man. It was an honorarium project in 2011, I think, for the first time. 2012 it went back. It was built at the generator in Sparks by the Pier Group, led by Matt Schultz, and with the support of many, many, many burners in the area.
Yeah, it's a community art project. It went out to Burning Man as a piece that was built there for people to explore as an art piece, and now it lives at Fly Ranch. And so do we know, Lisa, is this going to be here forever, or what do you think? Is the pier something that comes and goes, or how does that work on Fly Ranch with installations like this?
It basically depends on the art project and the agreement that the Fly Ranch project and the artist have together. But this one, I don't see this going away anytime soon. I think this might even be its final resting place, but it seems quite fitting. And it's kind of fun to, sometimes when I'm on a walk or leading a walk, I joke and I say that this used to be an actual dock where ships would come up and exchange goods. And I've gotten some looks of astonishment that they actually thought that this was an active port.
It's really convincing. Okay, so now we're going to move on. So that was the pier, everybody. Kind of a quick move, but now we're moving on to talk about these dust devils that form out here on playas. So we found one that was forming, and basically it's just when wind kicks up, and the wind out here can get really severe and can run pretty constantly. And sometimes it'll catch some dust, and these can run on and get very, very tall and run on for miles. Anyone else want to share, like, maybe what is the dust composed of, or what makes it so fine, so powdery?
It's picking up the matter from the playa as it crosses the topsoil, essentially, and carrying it elsewhere. So it's the thermal gradient. It's experiencing a hot pocket on land and then being drawn up into the cold air above. So you get the same sort of rotation as in a tornado.
Great. Okay, let's see what happens next in our walk. We're
looking over with greasewood. We see greasewood out here, and we see, oh, Scrippus, you can do this better than I, but there's shad scale and saltbush in there. And we're looking at Yaga's house off in the distance.
Yep.
Which gives you a sense of one side of the ranch to the other.
Yeah, so we're looking south right now. Go ahead, Scrippus.
Yeah, so this particular part of the ranch tends to be dominated by more alkaline playa, like more playa. So you find mostly greasewood in this area. It's a lower elevation. It tends to sometimes get a little bit wetter than some of the higher parts of the property. But yeah, this is I would say the majority of the site is dominated by the greasewood just because of its the lower elevation. But there is some patches, or are some patches of sagebrush to the south.
So we should say a little here too that Fly Ranch was bought by the Burning Man Project in 2016. It's 3,800 acres, and 640 acres are riparian, or wetlands. So you can experience a lot in just a small area here. We're lucky that we have places that can welcome a structure like Baba Yaga. She fits perfectly in here.
Nice. Now, our next question is there any evidence of meteors at Fly Ranch, and have they been investigated? Kind of far out, but any evidence of meteors out there?
Surface, maybe that's why it's called Fly Ranch. The meteors keep flying in.
So I haven't seen any signs of any indentations in the ground that were made by something like a meteor coming in. And although I've seen meteor fragments in museums and such, I've never actually held one or know quite if I would be able to distinguish that from some of the other igneous rocks that you might find out there. But yeah, I would be excited if there was something like that out there, but I haven't seen any evidence for that so far.
The skies are dark and clear enough that you can definitely see things, streaking across the atmosphere, but as to whether they fall here, not sure on that one.
Yep.
Okay.
There are a lot of artifacts that fly, though. So there's lithic scatter from the time that the indigenous tribal people have used the land. There are remnants of the time that Basque shepherds used the area, remnants of when it was a working ranch, and remnants of the 1997 Burning Man event, which was held on the Fly Ranch property. So we were just looking across the lower salt flat again. We're looking out towards Finley Peak, and I have our faces in front, but I think we're looking towards Steamboat Peak. So we're looking beyond the Black Rock Desert in the far distance. We're seeing the north end of the Camas. So there's King Lear Peak again in the distance, just a little left of center. Finley Butte, and then across from Finley Butte, beyond Finley Butte, is the Camas Mountains. And there is a mine there, Highcroft Gold and Silver Mine. I think that it used to be Allied Nevada, and they filed for bankruptcy protection when the economy tanked about the same time that Empire, our nearby town to Gerlach, shut down. And it's been taken over by Highcroft, or they have reorganized as Highcroft Mine. They had limits placed on them for expansion, but in the current administration, those limits have been lifted, and so they can now, they're up to about 120 employees now from 30, and they have permission to go up to 500. In order to achieve that expansion, they've been allowed to eliminate 3 protected sites for eagle breeding because they could show that the nests were not active, meaning that they didn't actually have eggs in them at the moment, even though an active nest might be dormant for years at a time. So a little tragedy there.
Pretty serious. Yeah, there's so many issues that come hand in hand with the greater management of the National Conservation Area around here. Yeah, I mean, you know, and that's part of what it is to be also on a piece of private land that is interacting in this same space. We're still in the Black Rock Desert region. We're still surrounded by the National Conservation Area lands, but we happen to be on Fly Ranch, which is the white part of the map, which means that it's, you know, private ownership. So just another part of how land management works in this area. Let's look and see where our walk takes us next. Thanks for sharing that. So here's an interesting place where we get probably lots of birds and other kinds of animals nesting. Let's talk about what we're looking at here. Now we're kind of basically, we were looking to the right, everybody, and now we're looking to the left on the nature walk. So this is on the left here.
We've gone from east to west. So now looking west.
Oh, there you go.
We're looking at the granite range. So the granites go up to 9,000 feet. So it's still with snow, even though we have 90-degree days right now. It's quite a place. And then we were just looking off towards Right-Hand Canyon to the Red Mountains. You can see a little bit of the blush of cheatgrass on the mountainsides.
Kind of down around here. I don't know if it's showing up as clearly for everybody, but yeah, you can see a sort of a reddish rust color. That's
one of the invasives, Russian olive.
Oh, that's the one that we were just flashing past.
We'll get to them all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the favorite. There are 3 bands of Mustangs on the ranch, and this is the favorite scratching post of one of them. Another one is just north of the reservoir, the southern end of the property.
Cool. Anytime you see something you want to talk about, go ahead and jump in. So I do have this part right here, which talks about how these pools don't freeze over the winter, and that becomes important for wildlife and birds. And Skirpus, maybe you can talk to us a little more about that.
Sure. So this Fly Ranch happens to have a rather large geothermal area within its property, and so there's all sorts of hot water that's coming up. I documented, I called them hot holes for lack of a better term, but just basically where the hot water is coming to the surface. And documented over 120 of them peppered throughout the landscape, and there didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason between how the heat was distributed in the property or across all of the holes. But we have some researchers that are interested in looking at this and try to figure out if there are patterns underlying that, which I think is pretty exciting once we are able to open Fly back up again. But yeah, in this particular pond, I call it the middle reservoir. All during the winter, there are birds. There's a lot of American coots that are here. They're basically here year round. And then a lot of Canada geese and some tundra swans as well.
Neat. Cool. Oh, I don't know if we managed, you know, it was one of those weird moments. I don't know if it was maybe too warm or something, but there were like not a lot of birds on the water on this particular walk. And that's just the way this walk worked out. So here you can see how those reeds are on the edges, fold over and kind of get pursed down. So let's talk about this particular plant. There's a lot of interesting facts to share about this. It has 3 sides. What's something else we could share about it?
The rhyme that lets us remember: sedges have edges, rushes are round, grasses have joints right down to the ground.
All right, perfect. Can you say it one more time?
Sure. Okay, so sedges, these are sedges. They're
wedges.
Triangular plants. Sedges have edges, rushes are round, grasses have joints right down to the ground.
Great. Okay, so Scirpus, tell us more.
Sure. So this particular species is called Schile-Beers americanus. It used to be called Scirpus americanus, and that's actually how I got my name, because I was identifying it around Frog Pond my first year working at Burning Man, and then the name stuck. So now I'm actually talking about Scirpus for Fly Ranch. So I find that kind of a fun fact. But this plant actually is capable of sequestering a lot of carbon, both within its biomass, as you can see, because it doesn't really decompose that much, but then also in tidal wetlands, which I work in regularly, they can store a lot of carbon in the soils as well. And I have yet to take a core into these wetlands to see if I'm seeing if there's like a peat layer or a lot of organic material in these soils, but I'm really curious to see if that's the case as well.
Cool. Nice to know there's more projects on the list. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, never ending. I have so many ideas.
I would like to say, I love being a docent out here because I learn so much with every walk, even virtually. You know, I'm learning here, I'm scribbling notes as we go. And I'm really missing the interaction with those who would come along on the walk because they ask such good questions and offer such good interaction. So hopefully we'll be able to get back to that soon. We were going to say too that we are hoping to open Fly Ranch again soon, but it will be done, of course, under the guidelines and with the cooperation and communication with the tribe, Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, which of course lives in the area, and with the Gerlach and the Valley residents.
Thank you for mentioning that. It's really good to keep in mind we're doing a virtual walk because the actual property right now is closed to the public, but we will let you know once these walks can resume. Thanks for mentioning that. So now we've come upon a part of the walk where we are at a gate. And let's talk about the convention of what we do in the West and probably other places is you leave it as it is, or you follow instructions on any sign. So in this case, these gates are with a sign that says, please keep gate closed. Thanks. Do you guys want to talk about why that is? What are we keeping the gate closed for?
Cattle.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Scrooge.
So for almost half a year, there is a local rancher that has his cattle on the property. And this is the main area where all of the geothermal pools are. And so not only is it a danger for the cattle to actually walk in there and fall into the hot water, but it's actually helped to preserve all of this geothermal area. So there's hardly any trampling. I mean, of course, the pronghorn and the mule deer can jump over, and all the coyotes and rabbits. So that's the animals that would normally be there. But it's actually kept this area relatively pristine or not trampled by the cattle or the horses.
This is a way that you guys are working with land management in relation to the tradition of ranching in this area. Which is to say you're kind of have a way for the cows to come through, for the land to be used, but everyone's aware of how the land is doing. Everyone cares that the land is sustainable. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Erika, you had something else you wanted to add too.
I did. I was just going to say, you mentioned that, about the gates in the West, there is cattle ranching is very common. And so if you find a gate closed, if it's not posted, no trespassing, keep out, you can generally pass through that gate, but you close it when you're done. If you find a gate open, don't close it because you think, oh my gosh, some fools left this open. It's open for a reason. It's because the ranchers want the cattle to be passing through there. In most cases, there is method to the madness. So. Yes,
and so that's where the convention is. You leave it as you found it. But if there's a sign, then you follow the sign. You just say, oh, if it says keep this gate closed and someone left it open, go ahead and close it. But otherwise, if it's open and there's no sign, just leave it the way you found it. It's the way it works. Okay, so now we're going past the gate and we're on the other side, and now we're entering into the area where we walk through some smaller hot pools. So we'll take a moment and just kind of looking around. So if we were on the walk, we'd pause here and we'd kind of look around us to see, it's a pretty good 360 view from here. You can see a lot in all directions of what the landscape feels like. And we're on some really short type grass at this point, as you can see, but it's not playa exactly. There's something growing there. So now we'll talk about what we can find in this area, which includes natural objects. And we kind of treat natural objects with the same rules that you might treat artifacts in a leave no trace environment. So here we go, we're gonna come upon, first you can see there's some taller plants growing in a circle around this spot, and that's one indication that there is water there.
This is one of my favorite spots where I'm walking with Scrippus because she was taking the temperature readings while we were walking. And I think she tested the one on the southwest side of the trail and it was about 90 degrees. And then she tested the one just north, it was 110. And then just up from that, there was one that was 140. And so when we're doing the walks, this is a place that we always talk about hot spring safety. You must not arrive at any hot spring permission or curiosity or whatever, and just throw open car doors or whatever and allow kids and animals to run out or people in an altered state. Because hot tub temperatures can vary 25 degrees in 24 hours. So even if you're familiar with a hot spring, you always dangle a bit of yourself that you don't value too dearly before you dangle your really precious dangly bits.
So maybe just the tip of a finger or something, or if you have a thermometer, go ahead and use that to check the surface temperature. But then also it was pointed out sometimes what's underneath can be hotter than what's on the surface and vice versa. So make sure that you go slow, make sure that you know how to get back out, just have a plan and test it. And remember that from one space to another, temperatures can vary. You know, that's part of the have safe, be safe, have fun.
It's
Sorry,
also often travel surfaces around the springs, and so they can collapse while you're walking. You want to make sure you stay on trails. This is a place where we ask walkers to stay single file and look out for each other to make sure that nobody gets burned.
And one thing I just want to point out here in particular in this image, because you don't often get to see it on the property, but there is a very substantial population of showy milkweed. And that is the source of food for monarch butterflies. I didn't actually know that there was a monarch butterfly migration that happened across the Sierra Nevada range. And I was just walking out on the property and I saw about 10 of them fly by me. And like, of course there's monarch butterflies out here. But then I saw that the substantial amount of showy milkweed, and it's not showing its flowers right now. It's probably like another month away from that, but it sure is a beautiful plant, and I'm happy that it is being protected with that fence around it from the cattle and the horses.
Thank you for mentioning that. I think we do have a moment when we get right up and, oh, nope, that's the other plant, but we do have a picture of the milkweed in here. And I was pointing to it as you were talking about it, but yeah, it's so important for the monarch's migration. Good food source. Let's see. Oh, so here you can just barely see in there, this dark spot, that's where the water is. We don't know how deep it is, right? No one has figured out or bottomed out or something, one of these, or tested it maybe, but we're not sure how deep some of these smaller pools out there go. Is that true?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Okay, so no one's tried to figure that out, but also we're not sure. And then here's something right in the middle of the trail that we came across. This is considered a natural object. The rules of the walk are when you come across something like this, you just leave it where you found it. So step over it or walk around it.
We think this is
Erika,
part of a deer pelvis, probably a small kill. And it wasn't there in fall, so probably just killed over winter.
Maybe wash out something. And then this is from last year. Do you want to go ahead? You guys are
Goldenrod?
more expert. Yeah.
So that's a Nevada goldenrod. It usually has really beautiful, kind of more goldish, kind of puffy flowers going up. It's quite gorgeous.
And this one is, you know, from last year's grow, but spring's coming around, so we might see some more. And then here we were crossing a bridge on the property and came across something that was had been eaten recently. So this is another example of when you find a natural object or artifact, you just leave it where you find it. The next picture is a little bit gruesome, but I'm just gonna let it roll past. So someone had a meal there. And now this is just more walking through that hot springs area. These are really tall reeds. These ones are, I would say probably, do they get to be like 8 feet tall or taller than that?
Yeah, about at least 8 feet tall. So that's a Phragmites australis. In some parts of the United States, it's native, and in other parts, there's an invasive variant of it that came from Europe. And I don't know if this is the case for this particular part in Nevada, but I know in parts of San Francisco Bay, there's some invasive ones, but there's also some native ones as well. So it's kind of tricky to tell.
Okay, so we're not sure if these ones that now you can see them in the distance, kind of past Erika, but are they native to Fly Ranch, or do we know?
I'm not sure. That's something that I need to ask some fellow botanists about. So that I think you have to do genetics, but it might be easier just to ask somebody.
Right, sure. To like say like, do you happen to know this already before we go in that direction? So now we're coming up.
The bridge now, this bridge was built on one of the first volunteer weekends in 2018 at Fly Ranch. People, Burners Without Borders volunteers and others from the community were clearing remnants of the ranching, looking for ways, setting aside things that could be used as art or that could be repurposed into infrastructure. And we had been jumping across this ditch. So a couple of people pulled together these pieces. This is the wheel from irrigation system and some planks. And so it's a perfectly functional bridge now. But wherever you have elevated spots like this, like the fence posts or these half irrigation wheels, those are the spots where the raptors sit with their prey. And that's why you often find things like the wings and legs or owl casts and things adjacent to these structures.
Nice. Now, someone is asking about pronghorn. They thought pronghorn wouldn't cross a fence, even though they could. So do we know, have you seen many pronghorn at Fly Ranch, or is that true about pronghorn and fences?
I have seen many, well, I guess depending on the season, I've seen a lot of pronghorn on a property, and I've seen them hop over the fences. So I'm not really knowing that much about them to begin with. When I came on the property, every experience with them is basically a new experience. So when I saw them and also the mule deer crossing, I was like, oh, I guess they're capable of hopping the fences. But
yeah.
We were told in site stewardship training that fence construction should allow 20 inches clearance below barbed wire so that pronghorn can go underneath. But I've seen fences with that allowance and still the pronghorn jump over. So I think they've got it figured.
Pronghorn do what they want, I guess is how it comes out in the end. All right, cool. So here I paused right here because you can see the bridge made of found objects. That was a Burners Without Borders volunteer weekend project. Really interesting that they came together and just saw this, that's a wheel of a sprinkler set, like those large sprinkler sets. And they were like, well, this isn't functioning as it should have in the first place. So we're gonna make it a railing now. And yeah, now there's a bridge to help us cross over this part. So let's see what comes up next in our walk. Let's see. Oh yeah, so sometimes out in this land, we see small planes come flying out and buzzing over the ranch when we're doing our walk. And that always brings up the question, what about a runway? Wasn't there once an airport or a runway or a landing strip out here? And is that why they call it Fly Ranch?
Well, they say that in the 1930s, it was a biplane training facility, and that's the reason for the name.
So then what
And
about
there is
Fly Canyon? Oh, sorry, go Scrippus.
There is actually the remains of an airplane on the property. It's been picked apart over many, many years, but it is in the area that's the flattest and has a lot of disturbance to it. So I'm pretty sure that's where the runway was.
Okay, so there was a runway out there, and it was a biplane training facility, and so maybe this is why it's called Fly Ranch. But I mean, is that known definitively that because of that, therefore? Or is it just that we know there were planes out here? And also, by the way, the plane wreckage isn't somewhere near the walk usually, so we won't see that here.
Right. So the name Fly Ranch begs the question, how did Fly Canyon get its name? As you, let's see, what are we looking at now? We're looking, yeah, it's the wrong direction. As you look north from Fly Ranch, you look into High Rock Canyon, which has been closed until just last week for the bighorn sheep lambing. It's closed for 2 months every spring for the lambing. But as you head towards High Rock Canyon, you pass a formation to the east towards the northern reservation. There are a series of very deep pots, like 70, 80 foot deep holes sculpted into the cliff rocks. And that's called Fly Canyon. I don't know how long it's been called Fly Canyon though, but longer than since 1936. So one wonders.
Yeah.
So Fly Geyser.
Right. Well, and on that note, speaking about Fly Canyon, Fly Geyser, and so on, if you happen to have any information or if you think you know, we'd like to hear your story. So please email us info@blackrockdesert.org and let us know if you have any stories, maybe in your family's history or something you've heard. We'd like to hear your stories too. Yeah, you can see this now coming up through some of the bushes around it, but there's Fly Geyser. We're walking up on it, guys.
So the greasewood that you see in the foreground there is really important for the overwinter foraging for the animals.
And now these are just some scenic pics. Here you can see, later on we'll walk through this gate, but this is just sort of the area in general around. Looking at some of the mountains right there. You can see there's still some snow on the tops this time of year. This is kind of the...
You can see remnants in some of those pictures of the ancient lake levels, the shorelines from the high stand of Lake Lahontan 14,000 years ago. So as we walk on the ranch, we would be about 500 feet under, we would have been about 500 feet underwater. We're at 4,000 feet elevation while we're there. And then those mountains behind go up to 9,000 feet.
And so now as we keep looking around, we see another pool to the right. And we start to see another geyser come into view. So now we're walking up toward the Wizard. So just over your shoulder, Erika, what are we looking at here?
The geyser that formed after drilling in 1916. So they were looking for water for farming purposes, irrigation, but the water came up hot, and so they walked away from that project. Over time, the water shot about 10 to 12 feet in the air, and this geyser formed, the calcium carbonate tower, until 1964, when Fly Geyser, the more recent geyser, was drilled. 1960, are we gonna pan to that now? 1960?
It's about to get, oh, there we go. You can see it right there in the background, as if we were standing at the Wizard looking at it.
One of the geothermal companies was looking for water for a project, a hydrothermal project. They needed water that was hotter than 250 degrees, but this came up cooler. And so either the well was capped and the capping didn't hold, or it was never capped, or somebody preferred that it not remain capped after it had been drilled, since ranchers always want the water. And so since 1964, what we now call Fly Geyser has been forming.
And so okay, so now we've seen the Wizard. We're about to get a close-up view of what the Wizard looks like. Oh yeah, what lives in the pools before we go looking straight at the Wizard? Yeah, fish. Like, you know, there's fish in there along with extremophiles. Can we talk about what these little critters are? How about spearfish? You want to go with that one?
Sure. So these are tui chubs. They're the same fish that you would find within Pyramid Lake, but these guys stay small. And I can always tell roughly what the temperature of the water is if there is the fish in the water. So in this particular hot spring where a lot of people go soaking, if I see the fish, that it's not quite warm enough to go in. When I don't see the fish, I know that it's like a good hot spring temperature. Or it could be.
Interesting.
You never know,
Yeah.
but yeah.
So when you see the fish, you're like, maybe not this time. It's a little bit too cool.
Yep.
Good to know. Okay, so yeah, those guys are kind of swinging around in the mud right around where we're seeing this guy, and that is a closer up look. And does this one, you know, when the water comes out of a geyser, it's called like an eruption. So does this one erupt continuously, or does this one have some stop and go?
It's trickling.
So these basically all of the what we call geysers on this property are actually artesian springs because they are flowing. They just happen to be geothermal, so they're very hot. So like when you think of Old Faithful at Yellowstone, that is a geyser because it has to build up pressure and then it releases, and then it has some sort of periodicity to it. But these are basically flowing all the time. This particular one, the Wizard, since it is so old, it's basically grown to the max that it can sustain given its pressure. So there's just a little bit of water that's coming out of the top. There's some fissures on the side where you sometimes get some steam that kind of occasionally comes out, and it's kind of neat just to listen to it. And then the water down below, I believe I measured it was 180 degrees Fahrenheit, just with this really thin water. Yeah, it's pretty hot.
Oh, so what you're saying is it's not even that it goes down very deep. It's like it's coming out at about that temperature. Wow.
Right. Yeah. So it's very shallow, the water around this with the Wizard, and very hot.
So one of the interesting birds that you see out at the ranch is the marsh hawks, the Harriers. And this year they nested just to the left of Wizard, just as soon as the ground was dry enough to sustain a nest. And you can tell where the Harriers are, first of all, because they're often flying up and about, with their ink-dipped wings. But they also do great battle with the golden eagles. So a lot of fun to watch.
Okay, so you guys, we're actually getting close on time, so we're going to go ahead and move on and head over to Will's geyser now. It's another geyser on the property, so we're saying goodbye to the Wizard there in the background. It's pretty cool. One of the first ones to show up there on this property. And now the walk's just going to kind of move along for a minute, so you get a sense of that feeling that we're just walking around. Let's see. And at this point, there is a question about the future of Fly Ranch, and someone is also asking, what is Burning Man? So maybe let's talk about the invasive species and kind of what is happening on Fly Ranch to help manage that, because I think that's really related to how Will's Geyser is doing right now. And then we'll talk about the future of Fly Ranch, and if we have time, we can talk about what Burning Man is too.
Go Scurpus.
Sure.
Okay, so here yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say we have this open view of the Wizard, which before was blocked, like last spring or fall. This view you couldn't see because of all the plants that were in front of it. So you guys have a plan to help with some invasive species, and that's why we can also see the Wizard so well right now. So go ahead and tell us about it.
Right. So this particular tree species that is here is salt cedar or tamarisk, and there's two varieties of it. One of them just expands; it just grows like crazy and takes over entire watersheds, and others just grow at a more moderate rate. So the one that we have here on property is growing at a more moderate rate. And because of the dam maintenance that we have to do on the property, a lot of the vegetation will have to be removed that's right in close proximity to this dam, just so that it maintains its integrity. So all the greasewood and sagebrush will have to be removed, even though those are native. But
so that will go along with it, just so that the whole project happens in one swoosh. Okay, cool. So this is a close look at the invasive species, in case you're wondering which one it looks like. Kind of has little pink flowers right now. And this is what it looks like walking up to Will's Geyser before, like all of this plants and such in the path there. Oh, and yeah,
thank you, Joe.
Yep. Then we moved up on Will. So yeah. So now you guys, we're going to go ahead and just move on to this part of the walk. What do we have here? We're walking up on Fly Geyser itself. So feel free to talk over this as it's playing and tell us about the geyser and maybe a little about the future of Fly Ranch too.
Scorpius, you're welcome to go.
Sure. So one thing that I can say about Fly Geyser is that it's very dynamic. It's always changing. There's new spouts that show up. There's spouts that get covered over. Water direction changes. So this area that we're looking at now actually used to be very vibrant as of the end of last year. But with the large temperature changes that happen between the water coming out and the air temperature, a bit of the geyser is breaking off. From when it was flowing and growing quite substantially. So now the geyser is in the stage of where it's kind of decaying in some parts of it, and it's changed the water flow. So this used to be this beautiful green and oranges and some yellows. You get more of the red and the deeper oranges with the hotter temperatures that are all cyanobacteria that are living in this hot water. But yeah, this used to be flowing all over the place. So it's always changing. You never know what the geyser is going to look like.
Yeah, so on that side it's pretty dry, and I did try and make it kind of obvious that you can see the color change difference. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you. And now we're going to move to the side that has a little more of the color side that you're talking about here. So coming around. Oh, there's Erika standing there, so you can see the steam in the background as well. Mm-hmm. And this is where we go from the dry part over to looking away from the geyser. You can see where the plant life begins to take root and starts to grow again.
So you can see all flat off in the distance there. And then this is the newest forming pond. The terraces form as there is deposition around them. So this is a new forming pond. These are the young corms getting their first growth this year. I just love this pond. It's already got tui chub swimming in it. There are a lot of dragonfly and damselfly nymphs. And then, of course, while we were, and I said, and there were spiders walking across the water, Jesus bugs. And sure enough, here came a spider.
Yep.
Wow.
Skated right across the top. Do you know what species that is that we're looking at? It's a little black spider that ran right across the surface, right at me.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I wish I knew.
Well, then it ran off to the side. It's like, I'm out of here. So, oh, here we go. This is more of that rainbow color that you get from the geyser. Let me go back to that really quick so we can say hi to that spot. Let's see. Spider and geyser. Okay, so this is more of the rainbow colors we get, and this is from hotter temperatures. You start to see more of these colors coming out. And then it's going to come around here, one more scene view, and now you can really see that green to orange, red, gold that you were talking about. Really beautiful colors that make up the kind of geyser rainbow. Are there extremophiles or anything that's, playing into this? Or I've heard it described as like, if this were underground, kind of where it naturally would occur, it wouldn't have these colors because of how they interact once they hit the surface with oxygen and other components, or that these would be like stalactites or stalagmites underground. So talk to us about what happens when this stuff hits the surface.
So there are the whole suite of species that are able to survive in these extreme temperatures. And there are some researchers that were considering a project looking at these geysers at Fly Ranch for what you might find, species you might find in outer space. These extremophiles that live in really extreme environments, that's the name. So it's, I am not entirely sure about what the differences between above and below ground would be. Definitely oxygen plays a role in how anything interacts, whether it uses it for its life or not. But with this, we're seeing just different species of these bacteria, cyanobacteria, interacting with the temperature. So that's where you get the range in the colors.
And are there crystals or other kind of rock formations that happen to form because of the conditions of the geyser? Like, so things that are special to this geyser?
Mm-hmm. So I was able to see once one of the spouts that had fallen apart, and on the inside of it, it looks like it was quartz, but I forget what technically it is, but it's a different type of rock, but it has the look and the feel of quartz, but it's just from the temperature and the buildup over time that it's grown at that crystalline shape.
Okay, so it does make a kind of crystal. And then here we can see where those kind of strata are forming. This is kind of the new formations of strata forming at the base of the geyser here. And then I think we just go with a nice scenic view of the geyser itself. So with our last couple of seconds, let's look at what questions may have popped up. The questions we have still are, what is the future for Fly Ranch? So Scarfish, you want to talk to us about the future of Fly Ranch?
Sure. So we have this really amazing design competition that is happening at Fly Ranch this year. It's LAGGY 2020, Land Art Generator Initiative, and it's a competition for it's kind of like the merging of sustainability and art. So how can you have function and be visually appealing at the same time? And so this is a open design competition for anybody in the world, and it looking at shelter, geothermal use, food production, there's composting, human waste. I'm forgetting all of the different components of it, but again, it's LAGGY, L-A-G-I 2020, and you can get more information on that, and that will help to inform potentially what sort of buildings and operations and such that will happen into the future, so that it has an artistic lens to it, but it also is sustainable and regenerative.
Awesome. And if you'd like to know more about that, I did put a link to more information in the chat box here. I would like to say thank you, Dr. Lisa Beers, and also thank you, Erika Wesnousky, awesome volunteer with Friends of Black Rock High Rock. Thank you for joining us for the virtual Black Rock Rendezvous tonight. It's exactly 7 o'clock right now, so if you guys wanted to look through the comments or anything and stay on, we can, but we're at the top of the hour, so thank you very much for your time and for joining us for this wonderful virtual Fly Ranch Nature Walk. Thanks a lot, you guys.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Cool. It looks like someone's asking how many people tuned in, and I am looking for, I wonder if Chris could tell us, but I know at one point I saw 37. I'm not sure how many overall, but thank you everyone so much for being here tonight. Please make sure you go to blackrockrendezvous.org for more information about our programming, and check out all the different nonprofits, Friends of Black Rock High Rock, Burning Man Project, Nevada, Friends of Nevada Wilderness, and Nevada Outdoor School, all working together to do this virtual Black Rock Rendezvous. Awesome. Thanks so much, ladies. Thanks a lot. Have a great night.
Bye. Thank you.